Hello and welcome to another episode of Children's Church. We've been going through stories that, involve kids in the Bible. Now there's actually two different stories that have a common theme here that we're going to lump together today. See if you can figure out what the themes are. Okay? Now the first story comes after John the Baptist has been beheaded and Jesus has been, he's been doing lots of ministry and frankly he needed kind of a little bit of a break. So Jesus went north. He actually left the entire country of Israel behind, and he went up to an area called Tyre. Tyre and Sidon were kind of cities that were right near each other up along the Mediterranean. So it's up north into what we would call Lebanon now. He's up in that area. So basically everyone in that area is a Gentile. There are some Jewish people up there, but mostly it's Gentiles up there. And Jesus is just trying to get a break. And he goes into a house for some peace and quiet. Now, crowds gather around. People need to see him. And Jesus is going, really? Now, this lady comes in, and she's a Canaanite. She's a Gentile. And she's actually Greek. And she was born up in an area called Syrian Phoenicia. Now, she needed to speak with Jesus. She really wanted to talk to Jesus. She had a daughter, her only daughter, who had a very big problem. She wasn't just sick. Her daughter actually had a demon that was bothering her and made her daughter just very sick and ill. And it was like it was trying to kill her. And she needed Jesus to get rid of this thing for her. But Jesus knew that she had a deeper need. See, she didn't feel that she was important enough to be able to talk to Jesus. And so she was dealing with this, I should just give up. But no, my daughter needs this. And so she's wrestling with this. And Jesus, actually, this sounds horrible, but he ignored her. He wouldn't even listen to her. He just pretended she wasn't even there. Because he was letting her really struggle with her emotions and how she felt. And the disciples, they didn't understand what was going on. This just really bothered them. They're like, Jesus, you need to send her away. She's bugging all of us. And Jesus just said, I wasn't sent to deal with her. I was sent to deal with the lost children of Israel. This is exactly what she was feeling in her heart. And she just cries out, Lord, my daughter, you have to heal my daughter. She has this demon that's bothering her. You've got to cast it out. And Jesus just says to her, this sounds horrible, but he says, it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Oh, it's exactly what she felt in her heart. And in desperation, she just says, but even the dogs get to eat the crumbs that fall on the floor underneath the children's table. And Jesus looks at her and says, woman, your faith is so great. That's the perfect answer. You can go home now. Your daughter is healed. And she was that very moment. The demon left the daughter and she was healed completely. Now later when Jesus gets back down into the country of Israel, we have a similar story, but kind of different. See, Jesus had been up on the mountaintop with Peter and James and John. They'd had this amazing experience. Well, while they were up there, they saw Jesus transformed into his full glory, where he just shone bright as lightning. And next to him was Elijah and Moses talking to him about things that were going to come. And they heard them all talking about Jesus leaving very soon. And so Peter and James and John just didn't know what to make of any of this. And Peter said something stupid and God shushed all of it. And Peter got humble real quick. And then Elijah and Moses were disappeared and Jesus was back to his normal shape. And they're like, whoa. And they're walking down the mountain after this amazing experience. And Jesus is trying to tell Peter, James, and John, okay, here's what's coming. The Son of Man is going to be crucified. He'll rise again on the third day. And they're just like, rise on the third day from the dead? I don't get it. So delete. Okay. He's trying to prepare them for what's coming, and they're just not. Their brain is on, and now you're going to come and kick out the Romans and make Israel great again. And they're like, wow. So Jesus is dealing with all this, and they get down into the valley where the rest of the disciples are, the other 9, and this crowd of people. And as soon as Jesus is seen by the people, they all start mobbing over, and they're like all amazed and wondering. And Jesus is hearing this commotion and goes, hey, what's going on? Well, out busts to the front this guy, and he yells out, "Jesus, you got to help me. My son, my only son, he's got this horrible problem. This demon has been bothering him, and it throws him on the ground and makes him convulse, and his froths at the mouth and goes rigid and stiff, and you can't move. And he's been doing this, and it'll throw my boy into the fire or into the water, trying to kill him. And you got to save my son." And Jesus is going, "Okay." He said, "I tried to have your disciples cast him out, but they couldn't." And Jesus goes, "Oh." And he said, "You wicked and unbelieving, unfaithful generation, how long do I have to put up with you?" Wow, that's a stern rebuke. And Jesus says, "Where's the boy?" And the father starts bringing the child to Jesus. And as soon as the child sees Jesus, the demon inside him just freaks out and throws him hard to the ground. He starts frothing and having this total scene. And Jesus just looks at this and it's like, I mean, this is worse than a kid acting up at the grocery store, right? Having a tantrum. I mean, this kid is like completely freaking out. And Jesus just looks at this scene and he looks at the father and goes, "How long has this been going on?" "Well, ever since he was just a baby." Okay. And Jesus says, "Hey, all things are possible if you'll only believe." Oh. See, Jesus just, like a laser beam, just nails right to where the problem is. The problem is the father didn't believe that God would heal his son. And the father just says, "I do believe." And then he panics and he says, "Well, help me in my unbelief." And Jesus, seeing this crowd of people starting to run to see what the scene is, he just looks at that kid and says to the demon, "Get out and never come back." And instantly, that little boy's body just shook. And with a loud shriek, the demon came out. And the boy looked dead. I mean, he looked pretty dead. And everyone thought, "You killed him." And Jesus just reached up, grabbed the boy by the hand and said, "Get up." And the little boy got up and was completely healed. No more problem. Oh, and the other thing, before, the little boy couldn't even talk. Now talking wasn't the problem. Yeah, it may have been the other way. He was talking. He was making up for lost time. And the father was overjoyed. And he left with his son. And everyone around was like, "Wow, that was incredible." Except for 9 people in the crowd weren't thinking, "Wow, that was incredible." They were thinking, "Why? Who are those 9 people?" Oh, all of the disciples except for Peter, James, and John, who had been with Jesus. See, they had tried to cast the demon out of the boy, and they hadn't been able to. And so they came to Jesus when no one else was around, and they said, "Hey, how come we couldn't do that? We tried. How come we couldn't get rid of that thing?" And Jesus said, "Because you don't have enough faith." He said, "If you had the faith the size of a grain of mustard seed," the tiniest seed known to the people at the time, tiny, 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 looks like a little bit of sand. Jesus said, if you just had that much faith, you could tell that mountain over there to go jump in the ocean and it'd do it. He said, "You didn't have enough faith." And then he said something interesting. He said, "This kind only comes through prayer and fasting. Through taking time to put aside the things you care about and 100% focusing on God and what God cares about and what God is like and talking to God and listening to hear what he says." See, this is something Jesus did every morning. Every morning he'd get up early and go out to a quiet place and just talk with God and listen. And his disciples hadn't been doing that. They'd been sleeping in. They'd wait in camp until he came back. That was just what he did every morning. That wasn't what they did every morning. Fasting and prayer. It's one way to grow your faith. And that's the end of our story for this week. Go back and listen to it one more time. There's 2 different stories in one. See if you can figure out the similarities and the differences. Okay, listen one more time. I'll wait. Okay, let's go through our questions. And remember, put your answers down in the comment box. I'd love to see your answers. Okay, question number 1. What did you like about this story? What pleased you? Question number 2. What did you not like about this story? What displeased you? Question number 3. What does this story tell us about people? What people are like? Question number 4. What does this story tell us about God? What God is like? The nature of God. Question number 5. Ask, what should I do differently because of this story? And remember, this one needs to be answered. I should... something. And question number 6. Who should I tell this story to? Now remember, it can't be someone who's been listening to the story with you, and it has to be a person, not an animal or a toy. It has to be a person. All right, I look forward to seeing your answers down in the comments box, and I look forward to seeing you next week when you join us for another episode of Children's Church.